Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be discussing intermittent fasting. Is it healthy? And some common questions that people ask about fasting. So if you're new to the channel, just remember to subscribe and click the bell icon just so you're notified of any new videos that I upload. As always, I'll put the timestamps in the description box below if you want to skip to any of those sections. So intermittent fasting is an umbrella term for loads of different types of fasting. So when someone says they're doing intermittent fasting, it doesn't really tell you much about exactly what they're doing, just that they're restricting eating in some sort of fashion. So I've broken down intermittent fasting into two types. One is time restricted eating and another type is just doing a fast. So the time restricted eating, there's loads of different variations of this. So this is broken down into our circadian rhythm, so a 24-hour period. So the main types are the 5-2 diet. This normally consists of eating one meal during the day, usually at 9 o'clock in the morning. This normally consists of no more than 500 calories. Then you would fast for the whole 24 hours, so your next meal would be at 9 o'clock the next day. So another really popular type is the feeding window, and this is something that I've done in the past, and a lot of us do without probably being aware of it. A really popular one is the 16-8 diet. All this means is that for 16 hours during the day that you're not eating, and then you eat with all your meals and all your calories within an 8-hour window. People do other variations of this, things like 18-6. They can do 20 and 4. There are a lot of other types of intermittent fasting or time restricted eating, but those are sort of main ones. There's other ones that people skip random meals during the day, but those are the two main ones. So the other type is doing a fast. This normally consists of not eating for longer than 24-hour period, and this is not based on our circadian rhythm. Some people fast even up to 2 days, even some up to 5, and normally these people would just drink water. Okay, so should you do intermittent fasting and what are the benefits? So if we're talking about the calorie restrictive eating, so this is within that 24-hour period, there is some evidence to suggest that it is good for weight loss. So there's one study I found that showed that people who skip breakfast tended to eat lower or fewer amount of calories during the day, therefore making them lose weight. So in itself, I think intermittent fasting doesn't do anything that sort of magical that helps speed up your metabolism, makes you burn more calories, but I think you eat less calories because you're eating in a smaller window. So for weight loss, potentially yes. So the other reason people do intermittent fasting is for health benefits. So there's a lot of interesting research looking at this aspect. Now, a lot of this research is done on rats, so it's still early stages, and a lot of the research is looking more at the fasting. So this is fasting for longer periods, 24, 48 hours. And as we know, rats' metabolisms are very different to ours. So, for example, rats will lose roughly about 20 to 30% of their body weight if they fast for 24, 48 hours. This is compared to us, that we lose roughly 2 to 3% at most. So we have to be cautious about how much we extrapolate from this research, but it's really interesting to see, or some of the effects that the rats had were quite astonishing actually in regards to having loads of really positive effects on their health. So intermittent fasting can release certain ketones. There is one called beta-hydroxybutyrate. Now this one has been discussed by a lot of experts to have anti-aging effects. Actually what I'll do, I'll just put a link in the description box below. There's a great talk or an interview that I watched with a professor called Dr Rwanda Patrick that talks in detail about this and is at that sort of forefront of looking or doing the research for intermittent fasting. And she looks a lot into this and does intermittent fasting herself. Intermittent fasting also has been shown to promote something called autophagy, which is the body's effectively spring cleaning process. So after you haven't eaten for a prolonged period of time, this seems to kick in certain mechanisms in our body that helps with cellular repair, getting rid of dead cells or faulty cells, and this can really have good beneficial effects in the long term. Okay, so common questions. So I look for some of the top questions that people ask when researching intermittent fasting. So the top one that came up, which is not surprising, is can I have coffee or caffeine when I'm fasting, and would this interrupt or stop the beneficial effects that intermittent fasting may have. So the question to this depends on what type of fasting you're doing. So if you're doing the time restricted fast, so this is within that 24-hour period, this shouldn't really cause a problem. Probably recommend not having your coffee with milk or sugar, but having a small cup of coffee in the morning while you're fasting shouldn't really be an issue. Now, if you're doing it for the health benefits that I mentioned just at the end with things like fasting, once again, that interview that I mentioned with Rwanda Patrick, she advises against having caffeine. And this is because your body has to metabolize the caffeine, and she thinks that this starts a cascade of processes that would then inhibit those positive effects that would happen from doing a fast. So the next question is, should I exercise when fasting, or if I've been doing a sustained fast? So this depends once again. For most of us, it shouldn't be an issue. So say if you've been fasting through the night and you're going to skip breakfast and you want to go exercise in the morning, this is absolutely fine. Our bodies do store a certain amount of glucose, which we use for energy when exercising, and we should be able to utilize this. If you're not exercising over 60 minutes, also this shouldn't be a problem. But if you're an endurance athlete, so if you're training for longer than 60 minutes, especially doing aerobic exercise, so things like jogging, running, etc., then there are some studies that show that having a small amount of food or to consume some calories before exercise can be beneficial. So the next question is, how do I break my fast? This one's just using a little bit of common sense. Make sure you don't binge. Try to have a fairly balanced diet. Don't be surprised that sometimes if you haven't eaten for an extended period, that after you eat, you can sometimes get a little bit of an upset stomach. This is to be expected, but that's why eating a smaller meal is advisable, because it should help eliminate this potential side effect. So to sum up, I think intermittent fasting shows great promise in things like health, longevity, and potentially for weight loss. Obviously, there's still more research that needs to be done. I think when we think about it, it makes sense that our bodies would be used to fasting for prolonged periods of times, especially when we think of our ancestors. They would have gone through stages of feast and famine, and our bodies, I'm sure, would have adapted to that and probably have started working in conjunction with that in mind. And so when we're not eating, our body then does other processes to try to repair and heal our body. Also, when we think about our society nowadays, especially in the Western world, there are so many health problems caused by overeating, and I think restricting a little bit or reducing our meal frequency is not going to do us any harm. If anything, probably do us some benefit. It's just something you want to do in moderation. I do it every now and then. Sometimes I'll skip breakfast and I'll just go on till lunch, and I found sometimes it can make me feel like I feel a little bit more alert and less sluggish in the morning. So something, like I said, it's maybe worth trying. As always, speak to your GP before you do any type of fasting, just in case that you have any other conditions that may be adversely affected by doing a fast. So I hope you enjoyed this video today. If you want to discover more about your health and well-being, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much for watching.